Welcome to Your Family Dog, a podcast dedicated to helping families love living with dogs.
Welcome back to Your Family Dog. I'm Julie Fudge Smith, and I'm here with Tina Spring. And today we're going to talk about joyful dogs. What is it that makes dogs happy? And how can you tell true joy from what we should call perhaps false joy? That people think dogs are happy, but maybe that's not what's really going on. But we're going to spend the first part talking about what it is that dogs do when they're happy. And which is going to be really fun because dogs have all kinds of wonderful ways of letting us know that they're really happy. And the reason this came up was today, a friend of mine and I went out for lunch, and when we got back to my house, I let Zuzu out, and she ran into the front yard, and she did her duty to God and country, and then she threw herself down on a dirt spot and just rolled on her back and rolled and started the little noise, and she was just so happy. She's rubbing her shoulders and her back, and she's kicking her legs, and she's getting grass all over herself, and she just got up and just went, oh. And you could tell that she was joyful. And my friend said, why do dogs do that? And I said, well, I think they might start rolling because they found a wonderful smell that they would really like to share with the world. Sometimes they have an itch, but you know what? I think that sometimes they do it just for the joy of rolling, that it feels good. It stretches muscles and it just feels really good. So what do you think, Tina? What do you think? Why do you think dogs roll? Do you think they do it just for the fun of it?
I do. I think some dogs roll because they're itchy, right?
Yeah.
Like I do think sometimes there's just mechanical stuff. But one of our pot cake, if he had his way, his entire walk around the block would be slithering through the grass, upside down, just blissful in the sun. Like that would totally be his groove. Putting stuff in all of his feathering, we call them his pockets, right? Like filling his pockets with stuff so that he can drop it on the floor for the Roomba. So
that's right, because a Roomba needs a job. I mean, that's why you have a Roomba, right?
Hey, yesterday our pug accidentally turned on the Roomba by himself. Mm-hmm. At first I thought maybe he was judging me for how dirty the house was, but I think it was just a mistake. But it was pretty funny. It was a pretty funny thing. So yeah, like I think sometimes I think people think their dogs should be joyful all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think they're more like us. I think they have like moments of their day that are fantastic, but most of the time they're like, this is as good as yesterday. Now I will say I have known the dogs that everything is their favorite thing. And those dogs are kind of magic. Our pug is a little bit that way. Like everything, like whatever we're doing is his favorite thing. Right. And so that body language is pretty easy to read. Right. I think for a lot of dogs, it can be harder, right? Like, mm-hmm. So one of my favorites to talk to families about is when the dogs have that windmill tail, like the tail, the roundy, what I call the roundy tail, where mm-hmm. it looks like you're winding them up. That's like a complete, like I'm just benign and happy tail wag. And I don't know that all dogs can actually articulate their tail that way. But yeah, I love that one. That one's one of my favorites.
We had a dog. I think I mentioned Rebel in one of our last ones, our Confederate trenching setter. And he had one of those tails and it would just whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And I just loved it. We would be out walking and he'd had this happy trot and the tail would be whooshing around like a windmill. So when he got a fluid-filled cyst on his tail, and you could empty the fluid, but it would fill right back up. So it finally got to the point where we knew it had to be removed. So the vet said, okay, I can do this. It's kind of near the base of the tail, but it's going to be kind of tricky surgery. And I said, I'm sure you can do this, right? Because I knew that if we didn't do it, at some point it was going to be so filled that it was going to explode. And that's a Sunday afternoon at 2:00. That's never during normal vet hours, right?
Yeah, so it's like 7 minutes after your vet closes.
Right. So he went in for the surgery. And at one point the vet calls me and Rebel is already under surgery, and he goes, "Oh, I'm just not sure. I really think that the easiest thing to do would be to just remove the tail because this is so close to the skin and it's really tight." And I'm like, "You can't do that." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I have complete confidence that you can remove this cyst and make the skin fit and have it work, but you can't remove his tail because he has this great wag, and that's part of who he is." And so, anyway, cheered the vet on, and indeed, he took it off, and it required us going back to the vet every day for a week in order to have the dressing properly changed and so on and so forth. So we spent a whole lot of money to preserve the tail, but it was totally worth it because he had this beautiful big waggy tail. But then when he was older and he got myelin degeneration, one of the first things to go was the wagging of the tail. So that was kind of heartbreaking for us. But oh, it's wonderful. I love that wag. And you're right. I'm not sure that all dogs can articulate their tails like that, but the ones who can enjoy it, because it's just such a wonderful sight to see.
I think a disservice we've done to humans is to say a wagging tail is always a happy dog, right? Like,
right.
I get lots of people that I'm like, they're like, no, he's happy. And I'm like, no. Like, look, sweet woman, like, look at his face. Like, that's not a happy dog. And my experience is lots of dogs, especially if they're feeling overwhelmed, just kind of let their tail do whatever it's going to do. Like, they can't hold on to all of the pieces all at once. And so the tail is something that they just kind of go, okay, you take care of you back there. And so then they're not really aware of what their tail is doing in that moment.
I would agree.
One of my dogs, like, his tail's the best barometer in the whole world, right? Well, and then, like, pug tail, like, there is nothing sadder than a droopy pug tail. It's like the saddest tail in the whole wide world, right? Like, it's hysterical. A friend of mine who's a vet said when she was brand new out of vet school, the first puppy client she had was this little tiny potato of a pug. And when she gave the pug his first injection, his tail went flaccid. And she said, I almost just went home and never came back because, like, it was so sad, that droopy pug tail.
Right. Well, I also think, too, sometimes when tails are moving, we're sort of veering off the non-joyful thing. But what I also think sometimes, too, when tails are wagging, that it's not necessarily happy, because sometimes I tell people, I say, when you're anxious or nervous or, leery about things, oftentimes people need to move. Think of the number of people who will twiddle their hair or pace or bite their nails, that the movement of the tail could be the release of that nervous energy. So you need to look at the whole dog and the way in which the tail is moving, and, is it in the position of the tail? Is it way down? Is it way up? So there's lots of different things, but that's not my big indicator for a dog's mood necessarily, unless I see the big helicopter or windmill roundy round tail. That is true joy.
I do enjoy the pump handle one too, the one that looks like you're priming the pump for water. That one, that tail wag is something special too. And yeah, like, I'm not always cleaning the kitchen because it needs to be cleaned. I'm sometimes cleaning the kitchen because I'm grouchy and not necessarily fit for public consumption.
Right.
Because I have to work off whatever that frustrated energy is. Thank goodness Christopher's never figured out that just pissing me off will make me clean the kitchen. Because that would suck, right? He would be like, hey, so the kitchen's kind of dirty. Your butt looks fat today. So the submissive grin is one that I think, poor dogs, it'll get them into trouble. And I always think back to my parents started out breeding and showing Doberman pinschers, and we took a trip to Disney, which was a huge deal, right? Like, we were a family of 6. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I think she had a part-time job at the time. And so, a big family breeding and showing dogs, like, talk about an expensive hobby. And so our one big family vacation was we went to Disney. And so we boarded the dogs while we were gone. And when we went to pick up Bugsy, our big male Doberman, my mom was freaking out. Like, what did you do to my dog? Because he's snarling, right? And sweetest dog in the whole wide world. And the kennel tech, I think, was like, no, 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 he's smiling. And she's like, he's never done that before. He was just so over the moon that we had come back for him, right? That he didn't have to move to Florida. That and from then forward, Bugsy did smile. And we had Dalmatians later on who smiled. One of my pot cakes smile. But I will say it totally freaks people out the first time your dog does that big grin at them. Yes. And I'm always telling clients, like, put that bad boy on cue, right? Like for cheese, and get the dog to be all squinty and smiley so that when it freaks out the vet, you could go, no, 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 it's a trick, right? See? But because it's like does look an awful lot like that. Oh, you're in trouble. C-shaped pucker too. Right. So, but I think that's it's a good discussion for like the concept of like you have to look at the whole dog.
That's what I was going to say. You have to look at the whole dog. What else is going on here? Do we have squinty eyes? Do we have soft? Are we kind of like, bobbing our head? Are we wiggly? Is my tail waving gently? All these things in combination are going to tell you whether or not, as opposed to the dog who's grinning and is stiff as a board and giving you a hard stare and is not moving at all. Right. That's a dog that I'm like.
Looks like somebody paused the video.
Yeah, that's the kind of dog that
those dogs scare the tar out of me.
They do. It's kind of like, I'll just stay here. I have no desire to go up and talk to a dog who looks at that, because he's clearly telling me he has no desire to talk to me. So if you don't want to talk to me, I can respect that. So, grins are interesting, and they can look really funny. You have to look at the whole dog in conjunction with the grin. Of course, a typical one is the play bow, which is just, it's so loosey-goosey. I mean, you got this butt in the air, and you got the paws on the ground, and we're just like, you usually get this, there's usually some kind of open mouth with that as well. I rarely see a play bow with a dog with a closed mouth.
Usually a dorky tail, right? A tail that's trying to balance the goofy head that's going on. And I've actually taught some dogs who weren't really well socialized, like to play bow. Like if someone play bows at you, you play bow back, right? And I mean, fortunately, it's one we can mimic, right? We can get down on all fours and do the big silly play bow. And most dogs, in my experience, do recognize that as like, oh, the human wants to play with me. It can though, and I had a chiropractic vet explain this to me, that a dog that play bows but is holding the bow is often stretching their back, that there could be a thing there. So the dog who, like, out of context, walk, stretches into a play bow and hangs there for a while, that can be an indication that there's some sort of restriction and they're not feeling great. So context.
Always
context. Right. If you're on a walk and randomly the dog play bows, like, I think you might have something else going on. That might not be unending joy.
Right.
In the moment.
It's Colleen and I always say, it depends. It depends.
Oh,
it always
hate
depends.
That answer.
I know. It does. The other thing is, with I think with sort of the opposite of the play bow, because the play bow is kind of like down dog, right? And then your dog can also do up dog and really stretch out that way. Mm-hmm. And I find that oftentimes my dog will do that after we've done a play bow. Then we stretch up forward into up dog. And sometimes we do that, and then we shake off, and then we want to play. So I think that that up dog stretch can also be an indication that we're kind of getting things in order, and I'm feeling relaxed enough to do this, and then let's move into play. So any kind of stretching, I think, can just sort of mean that your dog could be sore, but it could be that I'm feeling really good and ready to go after this.
So where do you stand on zoomies? Do you view the zoomies as a happy dog, or like where do you sit on that?
Well, we usually call it cracker dog in this household, and actually, I guess I haven't really thought about it. I tend to think of it as a happy dog, as a dog who's just, maybe it's a dog that's under exercised or really needs to go. But generally, I just find that when dogs do that, they are having a grand time. That they get silly. It's almost like over exuberance. They're very silly and they zoom and they zoom and they zoom. And then when they stop, I just feel great.
So I see some that do that, but there's a lot of them that's when like, ooh, you better watch it because there's going to be some reactivity, especially in dogs that are really, really anxious or overtired, right?
Yes.
Overstimulated, overtired. So again, I think a lot of these signals are in context. I get a lot of people with like 5-month-old puppies. The puppy zooms around the yard, and any attempt to stop the zooming puppy results in a pretty nasty mouthing incident.
Well, that's because the dog seems to be over-aroused, hyper-aroused.
Yes.
And so I think that it can be a sign of joy. I'm feeling really good. The weather's finally great, and we're out, we're playing ball, and I just need to release this joy. But I think it can also be, too, you're right, anxiety or just over-arousal. I'm hyper-aroused now, and I have to let this off some way. And if you interrupt that cycle too soon, the hyper-arousal is going to come out in another form, which is going to be excessive mouthiness or maybe even biting. So yeah, I think once again it's context. You're right.
Right. So I do love the squinty eyes.
Oh yes.
When you're like, are their eyes in there? It usually goes with like them pursing up their little mouth like a harp seal.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's like the whole face is just like, I'm going to smush a whole big dog face into like 2 square inches of smushy face.
That's right.
Which is what we typically call it, is smushy face. Like a lot of times if I take a puppy into a board and train, they're just as frustrated as their owners are. And we're always looking for the day that we first see the smushy face, right? Like then we know, okay, we've got this on the run and the puppy's doing better. And starting to just feel better.
Right. And the squinty eye sometimes also comes with very soft ears.
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes when dogs are afraid, their ears are way back or they're tight in, but they're tight. The ears are down and back and tight. But with the smushy face, the ears may be down, but they're very relaxed. And so that's what tells me that this is not a dog that's like, I'm scared, but this is a dog that's like, oh, I love you. Because everything about me is smooshy. My ears are smooshy, my face is smooshy, my body's smooshy. You just feel like you're playing with a marshmallow almost, or the Pillsbury Doughboy, because it's just so smooshy.
Right. And I find that smushy face often goes with something that I've never heard it called this before, but you called it cashewing, where the dog kind of moves or lays down even in I always called it like macaroni. Right? Where they make themselves into a big C. And I find that smushy face often goes with like I'm going to be in a C and I'm going to like, I'm
just going to turn myself inside out. It's like, I'm so happy. I'm just going to, cashew myself inside out because I just love you so much.
I have a client dog that we're going to work with tonight who's named Thursday. And she's about a year old, like hound something. And she has always been an outside farm dog, and now they're making her into more of a family dog. And while sometimes she thinks we're just dumb, like I don't understand why we're doing this, when she does engage and go, oh, we're going to do something funny, and she thinks it's funny, like especially if we're doing something that she thinks is silly and kind of charming, she will beat herself in the face with her own tail. And I'm like, okay, sweet girl. Like you might not want to be quite that happy about it, right? But she does. She's like bap, 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 and then like making why is my something smacking me in the head? And I'm like, you're smacking yourself in the head. Crazy dog.
That is funny. I don't think I've ever
she's really
seen that.
Sweet. No, she's
hysterical.
so funny. And she is a little Monty Python. She has she's probably like hound husky, which thank goodness it broke good, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Because there's a little bit of what if I don't, and a little of who's training who. So I actually really enjoy those dogs. I think they're pretty fun because they will teach us at least as much as we get to teach them.
Right. Well, I like the idea of a hound husky. There'd be like a houndsky. She's a houndsky.
She's just funny. Well, and then like she's named Thursday.
Yeah.
Right? Like okay.
Okay.
And then her owner's like the sweetest woman in the world. But she's not silly. Like she's very hospital corners. And so you can see Thursday going, all right, I'm going to go to work on her. Like we are adding some silly. So I actually wrote in the woman's homework, like, you have to be silly with the dog. You don't have to be silly in front of any of the humans, right? Because she's kind of introverted. But I'm like, you totally have to be silly, like with your dog. Like
I love that.
That is part of Thursday's love languages, is being silly. And we just had a doodle in for board and train that one of my staff was really funny because he's a wicked smart dog, crazy smart, like too smart by half, probably going to murder himself because he's so clever. But the way she explained how happy he is that his brain is filled with balloons and some of them are balloon animals. So you're like, hey, could you come with Carlton? He's like, here's a very nice panda balloon animal. And you're like, that's lovely, but not really what I wanted. But but like once you get that about him, like once you have that mental image, if that's how his brain is, you're like, okay, yeah, no, that kind of makes sense. He's super happy dog.
Okay. Well, I think we've sort of described some of the things that you can see in a dog that really makes them happy. But a couple of things that I wanted to point out that people may interpret as a happy dog, which probably isn't, that this may be a dog who's just aroused. And the Zoomies was one of them, that it looks like a happy dog. In fact, that's what I normally think, but you're right. It could be a dog that's just hyper aroused. There's other things that people mistake as for friendliness or happiness that are actually sort of arousal or other issues. One of them, which I think we've addressed in one of the past ones, is the pounce off, is what I call it. It's where a dog will come up to you and he appears to be friendly because he's all excited and he's sniffing and he's looking around. And when he comes to talk to you, he doesn't actually interact with you. He doesn't lean up against you. He doesn't interact with you. He just sort of uses you like a backboard, and he just pounces off of you and goes on about its other way. May come back and pounce off you again. This is an interaction that lasts a half a second to a second, and it's not friendly. And I personally really don't like dogs who pounce off of me because it's like I'm just using you as a backboard. And
I would actually like say that that's aggression. I mean, if I came up and head-butted you, it's not really a polite greeting. That's not very nice. Or maybe a better example would be like if I came up and poked you in the sternum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of these behaviors are defensive in nature, right? Like I think sometimes how we come into dogs to greet them over time teaches them to like be rude to slow the human down.
Right.
And I mean, like you and I have talked about that before. I actually just wrote a blog about it too. I see it so often where humans come in really hot because they're super excited to see the dog and they want to pet the dog, and there's not a lot of asking the dog how it is for them. And so I think dogs do sometimes resort to these behaviors that are maybe rude, jumping up, lots of licking, right? Pogo sticking, squealing. Like, I think there's just a lot of stuff that they do when they're overwhelmed, and they're trying to communicate with us too.
Right.
And so how is a dog supposed to communicate like, wow, that is too much?
But except to put my paws up and almost literally push you back, saying, right, back off. And I think it's disconcerting because even if you haven't tried to approach the dog, but the dog approaches you and does it, I think the dog has probably had too many experiences with overwhelming people. So I am going to be proactive. I'm going to make sure that you don't do this because I've had too many people who have overwhelmed me or come over the top of me. I like the fact that you mentioned licking. People always say, oh, it's lots of kisses. Well, my dog will give me kisses at times too, but there's also times where I think Zuzu is licking because she's anxious or nervous. And it's a way to say, hey, it's kind of an appeasement of saying, hey, please, please, please back off, or please help me here. This is too much going on. Lickety, lickety, lick. And I think it's more of a submissive way. I hate to use that term, but
and sometimes
a more of a submissive
pain.
way. Yeah,
it's just to say, get back off of me. Like it can be not being nauseated. Like there's all sorts of stuff.
Right. And I think sometimes it's a softer dog's way of saying, get away from me, because they know that this licking will also get a person to back up. We have learned that if I do excessive licking, people back up. So I'm not as confident a dog as the one who pounces. So this is my way of getting you to turn away. So
one of the ones I see in consults all the time is the dog who taps out, right?
Okay.
You go to reach for them to pet and they flip upside down. And it amazes me how many families go, no, he wants you to scratch. She wants you to rub her belly or scratch his chest. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually not what that was, right? Like that actually was a dog who was overwhelmed. And in the end, the behavior looks the same, right? It's the context of how they get there and all of the other stuff. And so I just think a lot of times we're trying to explain signaling, and it's kind of confusing and dicey for people.
It is. Lily Chin has a really great diagram, and I'll post it on the website. The difference between calm and shutdown. And it's just the comparison. And it's excellent because people think, oh, they want a belly rub. No, she's shutting down. I'm shutting down, and I'm trying to tell you, I'm no threat. Please back up. As opposed to, hi, here's my belly. I've already said hi. You can rub me. So it's a really nice diagram. So I will put that on the website. We'll also put a link to your blog that you just mentioned as well.
I think for a lot of families, looking at the overall context of the dog, does the dog look soft or does the dog look angular, right? Does the dog look stiff? Are you getting movement? And that anything in the extreme is probably not awesome. So then lots of asking the dog, right? Which I think is something that the world is getting better at. I think we're getting better at going, okay, well, this is my perception. What is your perception? And kind of even interrelaying that to our dogs. So I do a lot of just asking them if they want to be petted. Like, do you want interaction? Or are you okay over there? Like, I don't want to hold hands with everybody.
That's right. And dogs are really good at telling you, because if they want interaction, they're going to come over and ask for it most of the time. And if they don't want interaction, they are going to stay over there. And that's a pretty clear indication of, you stay where you are and I'll stay where I am, and everyone will be happy. And when I'm more comfortable, maybe I'll meander over and say hi.
Right. I think it's, especially when we're talking about kids and dogs, it's really hard for kids, right?
Like, absolutely.
Kids want to play with the dog when they want to play with the dog. And if the dog doesn't want to play with them, they often are taking it a little bit personally. And so I think that's something where parents and grandparents can really kind of just help a child navigate. And so I usually use the example of, like, what was your favorite toy on your birthday, right? Like, whatever that most awesomest thing was. And if your friend across the street came and rang the doorbell and said, hey, let's go ride bikes, would you want to tell them no? Because, yeah, I'm enjoying playing with my new toy, kind of thing. And does that mean that you hate your friend across the street? Well, no. Like, you'll play with him later, and you might not even be ready to share that really special toy yet.
Right.
Like, you might need to get to level 25 before you are ready to let your friend play. And that's okay. I think letting kids know that it is the dog saying, not right now, not no, never.
It's not you. It's not right now.
And turning it on its ear too. Like, are there times your dog comes over and pokes you and says, hey, I'd like some interaction, and you're busy doing whatever kids are doing? right? Like, it doesn't mean you don't like your dog. So,
Right.
or that you don't love them. I think I'm kind of rare in that when I'm doing stuff and a dog comes over, they're going to get a little piece of me. I tried to do that with my kids too. Like if I was making dinner, but you came over and wanted some interaction, I tried to at least pause and give you some part of me because you were soliciting politely interaction.
Right.
I don't know that families have the bandwidth for that all the time. We are
I would agree. I would agree.
species.
We are busy species. But that's one of the ways that I also encourage people to work on their come with their dog is every time the dog comes to you, whether you ask them to or not, there should be some kind of reward. It doesn't have to be huge, but there has to be something. Even just a recognition, oh, hi, you're here. I love you. Yes, I'll scratch your ears. And then I need to get back to what I'm doing. Giving your dog 2 to 3 seconds of your time may be all they really need. They just might need a check-in. Just like sometimes my kids would come up to me, they just sort of lean into me. It's like, okay, I put my arm around them and hug them, and they just gave me a hug, and that's all they needed. They just needed some reassurance, and off they went. So I think that investing a few seconds of time in your kids and your dogs in those situations will bring back the joy in their life.
Yes, and probably get you more smiles and wags.
That's right. You'll get that wind around rag. So, all right. Well, thank you, Tina, very much for joining me today. As usual, this has been great. And we'll see everybody next time on Your Family Dog.
Thanks for listening to Your Family Dog. Got questions? Interesting ideas? Visit www.yourfamilydogpodcast.com to share your thoughts.